line is the abundance in Egypt came to the end, but they were still okay after the famine. Even people in other lands who were affected by this famine, Egypt was still okay. And so in the whole land of Egypt, there was food. So when Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried out to the Pharaoh for food, even people who weren't a part of Egypt. And then the Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. When the famine has spread all over the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. The famine was so severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. God has set this up on purpose. It's pretty obvious what he's doing here. He's basically giving Joseph favor with the Pharaoh because he's got something else set up for Egypt and something else set up for Joseph. But first, he must make everyone realize the same thing that he always does, and that is God is in control. God will decide who he shows favor on. And those who are faithful to him and obey him, that's who he shows favor on. That's still true today. When we obey him, worship him, try to do what he says, that's who he's going to show favor on. When we pray to him when other people wouldn't, that's what he's going to hear. Other people are just going to wish. We're going to pray. And we can make our submissions to God, but we still trust God with whatever he decides. It's hard sometimes. It's hard for us as human beings to understand the ways of God sometimes, but here's what we can understand. If he's willing to die for us, we can trust him, and he does, because the story goes on. And what he's doing is causing people throughout not just Egypt, but the whole world is coming to Egypt, not just to get free stuff, to buy it. So it's making Egypt rich, on top of the fact that it's saving all the people. And who's in charge, really? Joseph. And I'm thinking if this is going to hold up, I know I was going to stop at 41. Let's go on to 42. Joseph's brothers goes to Egypt. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he says to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? I've heard there's grain in Egypt, so go down there and buy some for us so that we will live and not die. He's frustrated with his sons not doing nothing. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy the grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin. Remember who Benjamin is? Joseph's brother with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. Remember, Jacob had a favorite wife. Who was that? Rachel. And then he had favorite sons, Joseph and Benjamin, because of Rachel. That's who he's in love with. And so Joseph's already gone. He thinks he was killed. And Benjamin's all he has left of Rachel. So he's not going to let him go. So he sends him on. So Israel's sons, do you see we were talking about Jacob, now it's Israel. See how it keeps interchanging his name, but still Jacob is Israel, Israel is Jacob. Were among those who went to buy grain, and there was famine in the land of Canaan also. That's where they're from. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, and the person sold the grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces, just like the dream had said. Remember, they bowed down. As soon as Joseph saw his brother, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them because they didn't recognize him. He recognized them. And he's messing with them. That makes you wonder why, but it goes on. They didn't recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them. And he was like, it's happening. They're bowing down to me just like the dream said they would. And so he says to them, he's messing with them because he's going to get them afraid and show them who's in control now. But it's only to reveal forgiveness. So I'm not sure why he did it the way he did it, but we're human, right? You're spies. You've come to see where our land is unprotected. No, my lord, they answered. Your servants have come to buy food. And he says, no, you have come to see where our land is unprotected. In other words, where you can attack us and win. But then they replied, your servants were 12 brothers. So maybe that's why. It's to make them tell the story of who they are. Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and there's one that is no more. He didn't ask them. They just told it all. You're spies, he said. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison so that your words may be tested to see if you're telling the truth. And if you're not, then surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, then let one of your brothers go, stay here in prison, and the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households, and you must bring that youngest brother to me. And so they proceeded to do this. And then they start talking to each other. Reuben says, remember how he was trying to keep him from being kept? He says, didn't I tell you not to sin against this boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood because of what we did. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep. It broke his heart because he's hearing all this. They're all talking to each other. Then they came back and spoke again. They had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, but to each man's pack he put the silver back in their sacks. He gave them provisions for their journey. After this was done, they left and loaded grain on their donkeys and left. So they go down. I don't want to read this line for line, but I don't want to miss anything important. When they came to the father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened, basically. And they went through this whole conversation, so I'm not going to go back through the conversation. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring back Benjamin, because we have to take him. And Joseph has just gotten, Jacob's just gotten very upset. Their father, Jacob, said, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. And they're like, look, short of you killing my two sons, we'll bring him back. But we can't go to him if you don't give us Benjamin. But Jacob said, my son will not go there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. And if harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down into the grave in sorrow. In other words, it'll kill me. Now the famine, this chapter 43. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they'd bought from Egypt, their father said, go back and buy us a little more of the food. But Judah said to him, the man warned us solemnly, you will not see my face again unless that brother is with you. Israel asked, you see how it switches from Jacob back to Israel? It's just interesting. Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother? They said that when the man questioned us and closely about ourselves and our family, and he says, your father's still living, and do you have another brother? We never see any accounting of that. So I wonder, did that happen and we just don't see the accounting, or they're kind of like backspinning it here? Then Judah said, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once. So Judah's saying, I'll go. You already had Reuben say the same thing. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice by now. He's being sarcastic. It's just such a great story. Okay. So then their father Israel said to them, if we must do this, then put some of the best products you have in your bags: honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. These obviously were very valuable. And he says, take your brother also and go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant your mercy before the man, so that you will let your brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So they took the gifts. In verse 19 in chapter 43, it says, so they went up to Joseph's steward. We beg your pardon. We came down here the first time to buy food, but we need some more. When we left, the silver that we brought was actually put back in our pack. We didn't do it. And so we brought that back too. And he says, it's all right. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon because they had heard that they were going to eat there. And Joseph came home. They presented him with the gifts. They bowed down before him, and he asked them how they were. And then he said, how aged is your father? You told me about, is he still living? So now he's asking those questions they said that were asked before. They replied, your servant, our father, is still alive and well. And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. They flattened themselves out in front of him. In other words, they're really trying to bow down to him. As he looked about, and he saw his brother Benjamin and his mother's son, him and Benjamin, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one that you told me about?" And they said, "Yes." "God be gracious to you, my son." Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. And he went into his private room and wept there. After he washed his face, he came out, and controlling himself, he said, "Serve the food." So he couldn't take it. He just had to go cry because there's his little brother. They served him by himself, the brothers then by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians did not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to Egyptians. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, and the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. So they feasted and drank freely with him. Why would that matter? Because the whole point is the baby wouldn't be getting all the best stuff. And yet he did. So they're like, okay, you know. How much further are we going? All the way to 44? Well, we're at 44, so let's finish it up, shall we? Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of the house: fill them in sack with as much food as they can carry, and put the silver in the mouth of the sack, and then my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, with the silver for his grain. In other words, he's getting the extra. Morning dawn, they all got on their donkeys. They left. And after these men left, and they caught up with him, he said to them, "Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this cup my master's drink, from which he also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing that you have done." Now, just so you know, the silver cup that they're talking about, divination with a cup, was widely practiced in Egypt, and one of the things they would do is disturb the water with a small coin or drop of oil, and resulting patterns were read, like reading tea leaves in a glass.